you look at who these people are and who they went on to be professionally, they were leaders before they were titled leaders. You know what I'm saying? Like they were trying to do stuff collaboratively and walking the talk before getting really official jobs a lot of the times that identified their leadership ability. So really, you were part of those conversations, and then we got people together. Like the dream was in partnership with all of these people that helped put it together to say, how can we make, what's the best thing we could have people do? And we came up with the idea of writing a book. And we wrote a book in 3 days while we were there. But people had homework before they came. They had to do some writing and thinking of a story before they came. And we recorded some video of those stories. Those are still online.
I like asking people if they have a moment in time, whether it's a professional learning experience or just a person or some moment where they say I point to that as a seminal moment in my professional career, particularly. And that's sometimes a hard question to answer because you're a sum of all of the experiences you've had. So it's hard to pinpoint one. However, occasionally some people will say, yeah, it was this person that said this thing. It was this experience that I had, this professional learning. And today I am with my guest, Rodd Lucier, going to share the moment for me anyway, that is probably the thing I point to the most often as being a moment that really, I would say, transformed a little bit of who I am. And it was a professional learning experience designed by Rodd and a few other colleagues from Ontario, where in 2012, almost 14 years ago, 38, 39 educators from across Canada, right from coast to coast to coast, met in Toronto, took a train up to Algonquin Park in Northern Ontario with no cell service and spent 3 days just writing and talking and being with one another. And it really was a transformative experience, both on a professional, but also a personal level. And I wanted to bring Rodd on the show. Rodd's been retired now, but the impact that he's had, as you heard from that opening clip, has been pretty monumental for many of us. And many of the people that I've had on this show can speak to the impact that particular experience had. So we try to kind of unpack that and figure out, like, is that something that can be replicated? And believe me, I have thought about this a lot. There are certainly elements in my professional learning design that tries as best I can to encompass this, but there's certainly some elements at play here that are just not replicable. That's what we talk about today. So if you're interested particularly in professional learning, this is a really good conversation for you. And, maybe you'll get something from it. I hope. So anyway, join my conversation today with Rodd Lucier. So I'm going to ask you, you asked me first, but I'm going to ask you, when's your first time meeting? Connecting's not the right word, because it's probably on.
I was this teacher that was listening to podcasts back in 2007, 2008, 2009. Anyway, I heard this conversation of some educators out west. I think it might have been Saskatoon. And Ben Hazard, I think, was there. Glassbead was there. You might have been there. I think Darren Kurapatwa was there. And my mind was blown because everyone was talking about project-based learning and all this stuff that I was into that my colleagues didn't gravitate towards it. So in 2007, I think, I went to a conference and heard about Will Richardson was talking about Educon in Philadelphia, SLA. So I go, I got to go to that thing. And I booked myself to go in 2009, and you were there. And I remember taking this device out. I haven't had a chance to check this because I haven't been able to charge it. You reckon this is an old-fashioned iPod? Remember these things? And it used to have this micro that you just stick in there, press record, and it records stereo audio. So somewhere on this device is a conversation that was in a room the day we got to Educon. You were there, I was there. There were a couple of other people there. And anyway, I have this recording somewhere that I haven't listened to in probably 18, 17, 16 years. But I got to find a way to charge this thing and listen to it. But you were there. We played ping pong, and you wiped me out
Yes,
in ping
in the
pong.
high school.
Yes.
Really?
I thought I was
You're not
good.
good of a ping pong player.
I was like, this guy from Moose
Okay.
Jaw, surely I can take him in ping pong. But now
Here
we
you
got to have
are,
a
like you're a
rematch. Yeah, we've
pickleball.
had a little bit of golf. We got to do pickleball.
I'm sure your game is probably elevated way past mine, whatever mine was at
It's
that point.
2009.
Okay, that's fascinating because I wasn't gonna pick that time for my first time to meet you, but I know we had connected at I think a couple of conferences in Niagara Falls and a few things, and then yeah, and then we're gonna get to Unplugged in a minute. Okay, that's interesting. Now that actually, I want to hold that Edcon piece because I think that's going to inform part of our conversation moving forward. But just for people that are starting to listen now, and these two guys start talking about this thing, and who is this other guy? Give us a little bit. Who is this other guy? Rodd Lucier, aka the Clever Sheep. Tell me, just give the quick synopsis of your background and context.
My thing, if I could call it that, from about 2007 till I retired in 2017, was about trying to get teachers to do stuff they didn't believe they could do. Trying to get them to do stuff that they go, really, we can do that? And then they go back going, I know we can do this and we can do that and we can do all kinds of things. So it was about, so the Clever Sheep guy, I don't know if you're familiar with Monty Python. There's a skit, the Clever Sheep. Basically, the Clever Sheep is named Harold, and Harold sees all the sheep just going about their business, mooing and waiting to get slaughtered. And he goes, this is crazy. So he starts teaching the sheep how to fly. And you see the sheep up in the trees and they can't fly, but they jump off and they plummet. Anyway, they blame it all on Harold. He's the sheep who's trying to tell them there's a better way. So when I saw Will Richardson in 2007 talking about you could blog, you could put your voice out there and people would read it. And almost immediately people were reading stuff and commenting on it. I was blown away. But I became this Clever Sheep person who was trying to encourage people to realize there were different ways of doing things, that everyone just shut their door in the school and did their own thing, but there were different kind of cool ways to do stuff. And as new tools came along, I was trying to see whether or not they were valuable, test them out, try different things with them, join with other teachers. That's the big trick. Try and find other teachers who are trying to be clever as well, that sort of network those people and connect them to one another.
And that's essentially you and I were doing the same thing. That's my story in Moose Jaw. That was your story in London. And then we nicely were able to connect. And so we were on a very similar path and trajectory at the same time, very interested in the same kind of things, trying to do the same kind of things, really taking advantage of network learning, connecting to all these people. Yeah. And we could sit here and list the names of 50 people that both were influential for us. You've already named Will Richardson as one. But the other one that I want to piggyback to a little bit before I go into the core of what I wanted to talk about today was, so Edcon, Chris Lehman, still rocking it, principal in Science Learning Leadership Academy in Philadelphia, wanted to do a conference that was different. And he talked about this, and still is going today. It's conversations. And it's funny, even though I haven't been there for, 6-7 years before COVID, I can read people's experience with it, which mirrors much of what we would have experienced for those first times. Well, this is a different kind of an event, and it didn't feel like a typical conference. So maybe talk a little bit about that first time and the impact that maybe that conference has, and maybe I'm projecting to, but as a pretty influential professional learning experience that sort of stuck with you.
The big thing was connecting with those people outside of the formal conference type thing, right? Connecting outside of that. There's distinct memories I have there I remember the emotions being so high, full of joy. There was one session where we did the Snickers bar. Do you remember this? Was it Snickers? Alec, you were doing the session, I think, or Darren, something about photography. Anyway, we made this movie about a Snickers bar falling down and crushing someone. It was spectacular. There were a whole bunch of Canadian folks that were gravitated to this one group, and people were plucking hair. Yes.
Forced perspective. We did it. I
But
remember
it
I've
was
done
so
those and Darren's
joyful.
done
Like
those
it
too.
was
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
like
We're really
laughter
interesting.
is what I remember. I remember that distinctly and having this effervescent joy, buoyancy. Like we were together. I found my tribe and we were having a blast doing something that
Mm-hmm.
was real and fun. And then I think it was later that night, we ended up in a pub and we got kicked for singing "Oh Canada." Like
Yes.
like the I've got a photo somewhere on my Flickr account of that group, but it's all of us. You, Alec, Ben Hazard, Zoe, and there was one guy I still don't know who he was. I think Darren might have been in that photo. Anyway, that there was something about a glue that came with being together and spending time together outside of the formal conference sessions that became that's the most important part of the conference to me. And I started going to conferences, and if there weren't sessions that were interested, I was pulling people and sitting down in a foyer there with some sofas, having a coffee, and really connecting, diving deep, and getting to know these people. And that fostered a level of trust and engagement that went online where you could read what these people were writing about or see their videos on YouTube or chat with them on Twitter and really feel connected to them. So that if you could take all the best parts of a conference, those engaging pieces, that's what I thought we might be able to get out of Unplugged. If we got those people like yourself, you said you were doing that in isolation in Moose Jaw. There were people all across Canada doing it that way. But how do we get those people together?
And that's and this is an age-old query when people say the best part of the conference are the conversations in the hallway and blah blah blah. And say, okay, so why isn't that the conference? Why isn't the conversation always the conference instead of going to these formal sessions like we have? And again, this is mirroring what we talk about in schools, is that like we dream for authentic learning, we dream for kids to be able to direct their own learning, but then we're beholden to a whole bunch of compliance related work that is the majority of the time. And again, I'm not arguing that there's no value in that or no purpose in it, but it just seems, can we not lean more towards the other way? So let's figure out, and let's dive into, so how, for those people who are listening and still say, what are these guys actually talking about? I'll set the stage and then we'll try to unwrap it here. Rodd and really a few core people had an idea of doing something very different for a conference in the summer of 2012. And this was an experience that I've written about, I talk about quite a bit. It was an event called Unplugged, and it ran for at least another year, maybe more. Has some lots of pieces to it, lots of people's impact. So that's what I wanted to talk about. And it was this whole concept of this is not a professional learning experience that most people have ever had. So let's start from after you experience Edcon and maybe some other things. Where did this idea come from, and where was it birthed after this, and where did it go?
I'm just trying to find you again because I had loaded. For people that are curious, there are photos. There are still hundreds of photos of this event online on Flickr. And actually, the books that we wrote are out there too. So, where did this come from? Yeah, so I had gone up north as I normally do to my brother's place, and he's got this place up in the forest that is offline, totally disconnected, totally solar powered. This retreat center that he and his wife built over the past 25 years or so. Northern Edge Algonquin, it's called. You can Google that. But when I was up there, my brother elbowed me and said, "Oh, you talk about getting people together. Would you ever think of doing something up here?" And I left. The drive home is about 5.5, 6 hours, and my head was just spinning about if I wanted to bring people to something, we need to have like minds together. This would be the summer before we ran the first event. Talk to Zoe and talk to Ben, two people that I had collaborated with at Edcon. Two people I actually co-presented with both of them at Edcon at different times. And they were gangbusters over it. And we said, we need some people from out west. We need Alec Kuros. We need Darren Kurapato. We need this Dean Sharesky guy involved. And so we pulled you guys into some conversations about that. But the second year I went to Edcon, we actually had a meeting at Edcon where we had one of those side table off the conference talks. And I think Tom was there and Darren was there. And that's when Darren really got on board and excited about joining. So we had some meetings online via Skype, when Skype was the thing where you could have real live conversations synchronously. It was really the coolest technology. So we had these chats about how we could do that. And we chose some dates in the 1st of August, the second week of August, and got a vision for, okay, we want to bring these people together. Who can come? Anybody who thought they were a candidate to come could apply to come and ended up coming. But the people that came, like you've mentioned this earlier, like you look at who these people are and who they went on to be professionally, they were leaders before they were titled leaders. You know what I'm saying? Like they were trying to do stuff collaboratively and walking the talk before getting really official jobs a lot of the times that identified their leadership ability. So really, you were part of those conversations, and then we got people together. Like the dream was in partnership with all of these people that helped put it together to say, how can we what's the best thing we could have people do? And we came up with the idea of writing a book. And we wrote a book in 3 days while we were there. But people had homework before they came. They had to do some writing and thinking of a story before they came. And we recorded some video of those stories. Those are still online. But people were subgrouped. I think there were close to 30 people, but we were broken into groups of 6. And those subgroups met over time throughout the 2 or 3 days to work together to build chapters of this book based on the parts that they had written. So there was this air of accountability, responsibility, having to produce something, having to have it critiqued and judged, having to have it rebuilt. And then the celebration, the euphoria of, oh my God, we did it. I can't believe we did it, came out of that. But it's hard to put into words, but the pictures are probably the best way to understand the kinds of things, the setting. You picture you're in the forest and you're sitting around tables at a lakeside, and you're inside at a dining room in a large log cabin building, eating really well-made food that's grown on site, a lot of it. But then those armchair conversations are almost the entire conference, are opportunities to network and connect with those people. There was no going home at night. You went home and then, there were shooting stars at night. One night we sat out and watched the shooting stars, the Perseid meteor shower. So I don't know if I'm all over the place reminiscing about it, but that the Flickr accounts with Unplugged 12 and Unplugged 13, UNPLUGD 12 and 13, or 11 and 12. It's 11 and 12. Do you put show notes in? Sorry.
So the thing, I guess, the thing I think about, and it's always hard to like, like you hear things like when people talk about professional learning, and again, to be clear, listen, I understand professional learning is not just about going to conferences. It's not just about going to workshops. It's bigger than that. It's everything from year-long cohorts to reading a book. I understand it's a big thing. But when it comes to these sort of synchronous gatherings, if you will, whatever form that takes, there's always the question of what's the ROI on that. You hear teachers say, if I get one good thing from a session, that's great. The thing I can do in my classroom on Wednesday. And that is a metric. Sure, that's good. But I think also some of the challenges that I always, particularly as a presenter, face is I'm not really interested in giving you a tip that you're going to use on Monday. If that comes as a side piece, and I would include those things I was more like, how might we think differently? Like I think about the accumulation of all of the experiences I've had that makes me think and do things differently. That didn't happen in a 60-minute session that I went to, very rarely. It might have sparked something, maybe. So I guess I think about ROI on this. And to be fair, people invested their own money with this. Like everybody, like there was very few people, maybe some people got some district funding, but most of us just forked over the money because we believed in it. Just talk a little bit about what you either anecdotally or could say for sure the long-term impact of, and maybe not just this, but even your Edcon experience, really high-quality professional
the big
learning.
thing was
What's the value?
Sort of affirmation that you didn't get in your day-to-day work. It was other people who you knew you could tap on the shoulder, and they were part of your learning they like they called it a personal learning network, professional learning network. You had a group of people, but there's something about if you're in Toronto and you're getting on a train and going on a 4-hour train ride, having conversations with your seatmates, and then getting off the train and walking a little bit. Some people hung out in a park there. Some people hopped on a bike and rode 25, 30 kilometers into the forest to where we were. When you do that with people, we know that those experiences are transformative. That's where things cement themselves in the core of your being with memory and emotion tied to that. When they get there and then they're having these sessions that are planned but loose, coordinated, and casual. And then in between that, you're going for a canoe ride or you're going for a hike or you're hanging out at a campfire. There's something about the people that give you affirmation to do what you know you should be doing. So the writing that people brought with them was really it varied by individual, but a lot of it was their vision for education about what it could be, should be, might be. And they got affirmation of that by having it broken down, analyzed, and then published. And the group really supported one another in doing that. It's like when you work with students that can't do something, maybe shoot a free throw, but all the kids around are giving the kid multiple shots to try and make that free throw. And when it goes in, the celebration is everybody's celebration. And the one student feels supported by everybody else. And that's the vibe that I think people left with when they got on the bus to head home, was that, oh my gosh, we did something pretty remarkable. And we were on the other part, Dean, is that we were totally disconnected from the internet, right? So everyone, the only thing people had was they paid attention to the people that were around them. Oh, now, did you go to the football game in Toronto? There was a group that went to Saskatchewan. The Rough Riders were playing a football game the night before. Yeah. So these things are the richness of the things we do together are really this. They're like glue. They just make those relationships that much stronger. So one of the people that came along, Joey Taylor, came the second year. He brought the 6-string Nation guitar. And I don't know if you've had the opportunity to see that or hear that presentation, but we had Voyageur, this guitar that was made up of pieces from across Canada. We had that guitar with us and Joey with us for the second year that we ran things. And it was like a metaphor for all of the disparate parts of Canada and went into that guitar, whether it was a piece of a ring from a hockey player or a piece of someone's stick or a bench from Parliament or a piece of rock from a certain part of Canada, they're all in that guitar. And what we were like a metaphor for that. We brought all these people from across Canada, including the second year, someone from Australia and a few people from the United States, but they all together made this thing. They published something together, and there's something super powerful in that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of components there that when you tease them out and you think about how do you meet like this idea, first of all, of design diversity, right? Like you intentionally are having people there who are from different parts of the country who think differently, and yet there's certainly a theme and a consistency amongst them all in terms of what they value. Then I think all of this element, like whether it's the guitar or these artifacts and or items that bring people together, right? Something that whether it's, I don't know. And then I think about the canoe rides. I think about all these other times where you are in a place where there's some neutrality, right? Like you're in a canoe in a canoe with Zoe and I think Ben, I can't remember who else, somebody in there, and you're on neutral territory. So nobody's the host, nobody's nothing. We're in this doing the journey together. I think, again, this idea of disconnecting amongst what was likely the most connected people in education at the time. So there was that kind of weird dichotomy that exists. And then the fact that you made something together, like you actually built things together. And there were a couple moments for me that I remember. And again, without getting into all the details, we were in these sort of cohort groups where we were sharing our each came with an idea or concept that we wanted to build this chapter around. So mine was joy. I hadn't written that book by then, but that was really a big part of why I ended up writing a book about joy, was because I had this idea, but I hadn't really fleshed it out. And so I was within this group intensely querying my thinking. Why do you think that? And why is this? And so I just remember that sort of drawing out a lot of things that I hadn't thought of because they're pushing me. The other
All
one that I
right.
remember was I had Stephen Hurley in my group who was passionate about radio. And he didn't know anything about podcasting. He had no idea what this was. Like, this is not a guy that had any of those skills. Then, you look at where now Stephen's kind of transitioning to another phase, but for essentially a decade, this guy has created a podcast network. Like, he's done amazing things. And I know he talks about that as being like, because we just pushed him to say, like, why don't you do this? You love this this whole idea of radio and
Yeah.
audio was just like, that was the thing he was so passionate about, and he talks about it all the time. Guy, this is your thing, just do it. And so just those kinds of experiences, there's just something about the time that it takes to do these things, like the whole 60-minute, 1 hour, even 1 day workshops we have, as well meaning as they are, and the value that they still have, can't be ever replicated or the same. Because this was the other thing, is people, then we all had that question, well, how do we replicate this in our own jurisdictions? And so this was the second I went back to my district. How is this even going to work? Like, how would I do this? Because there was something, and believe me, to this day, whenever I'm doing professional learning, I think about how do I raise the level of this experience in whatever constraints I have to capture some of these things. And there's sometimes I know I can't quite get there because I don't have the nature. I don't know. So I don't know if you think about this, how much you think about this in terms of this was its own one-off amazing thing and just let's leave it at that. And how much of this is there are some truths and ideas that can be
Yeah.
applied
We had a
context
number
or other
of
contexts.
people contact us after asking, can you help us do this? Can you help us do it? After the first year, we got Kellyanne Power, one of the participants from Windsor. She actually came on the lead team for the second year, and she wrote a facilitation guide. There's a guide to how to facilitate an unplugged session that's out there. I'll have to share a bunch of links of stuff with you, Dean. I don't know if you put show notes together on your podcast or not, but links to photos, links to the reflections of participants. There are probably 30 blog posts out there that people wrote after having been there that are searchable with the hashtag, links to the photos. But the facilitation guide can talk about how we try to create the perfect lesson, is how one of the things Ben used to say. It's like, how do we create the perfect lesson? What would a great lesson be like? And the takeaway of people, even if they can't go and do it on their own, even if they don't feel that they can, there's a little bit of a nudge, like, you can do something different. This is something that was not given to us by the Ministry of Education. It was not given us to by a school board. This is a bunch of teachers during their summer vacation that are saying, let's take some time away from our families and do some professional learning with these other people from across the country. And of their own free will, these people came and paid to be there, to get there. And I hope they left feeling like, maybe I could do something like that. Even if it's just a gem of things, like we had to look after one another. We had our meals, and then we worked together in teams to clean up dishes and stuff. We worked, like, how do you build so it's not just people taking care of us? There's actual good stuff that can happen when we take the time to connect with the people we're around to do this stuff.
The thing I think about what we're talking about is relationships, for sure. And that's a word that gets used so often in education when we talk about our students, and we don't talk about that as much when we're talking about the adults. We talk about more about building relationships with our students. And I'm sure the closest parallel would be people who coach, people who teach drama, music, where they're spending time with kids outside of the structure of the day. They're doing overnight trips, they're going to games, they're in practices, and the opportunity to get to know others at a different level and do things that aren't within the confines of that class is going to obviously give you an opportunity to build a relationship with that. And we know that it's funny because the podcast I released with Ainsley Rose, he talked about, he's a former director general in Quebec, and he said one of his rules was, like, you don't go to PD alone, you go with two other people, because even if the PD's lousy, the drive to and from the PD or the travel is where the real stuff happens. He's taking advantage of those potential opportunities to really grow that, because I think there's just, again, the one of the epidemics I think in education has always been
Right
the
on.
isolation that many people feel. It's also a reason I believe why many teachers go into education, because they know I'm going to be left alone for a good part of my day, and I like that autonomy. I'm not saying that in a pejorative way. That's awesome. However, it's just such a hard job that like you're never gonna gain, I don't believe, full fulfillment and joy from the work if you're doing it by yourself. Like, you got to do it with other people. And the joy I had wasn't, yes, it was being with other people. It was like, but these other people are really smart and they've got
Yeah.
ideas that, oh, I want to use that too. Because I know I can contribute a little bit, but this
You
whole
mentioned coaching there
group, this is
briefly, and I
amazing.
think about if you have a team of players that are not just all the same age, live in the same neighborhood, so they all attend school together, so they end up in the same cohort of a class, right? They're not there by coincidence. They're there because they've got some talent in that area, and you're coaching them, but they all have that common interest and they're good. Then you could coach an all-star team. You could take the best of the best kids and put them all together. And we talked about Team Canada earlier today. You take what's it like to get that group together to see what they could do. And this is what we had with Unplugged, going back to that, to bore the metaphors. We had an all-star team that was self-selected. They said, I want to be on that team. I know the other people that are there, and I want to be with those people. So it's not like it was just a coincidental random PD that, oh, we got to get all the grade 5 teachers together to do something with them. No, it was people who wanted to be there, who wanted part of the process. So people, by being there, they had to buy in initially. And so even when you go to PD, you go to a conference somewhere, people are looking at what to attend, and they might commonly pick something that they think is of interest, and they coincidentally end in the same session. These people, they didn't know what the sessions were going to be because they were heart and soul of what each session became. I think of those big circles we had in the beginning and at the end of the different subsections of the meeting, where the conference, where we met upstairs and at the butterfly room is what it was called. But there was such a buzz in that room because you had a sense that it was really special. Those people all wanted to be there, and they were all people you wanted to hang out with. You wanted to spend more time with them.
Yeah, there's just, I think about what are the lasting, I've already mentioned a few kind of lasting pieces for that, but anything else just in terms of when you think about 13 years later, you do this thing, just people who in the last, whatever, 5 or so years that have referenced that and that you can point to the people that have identified that as a seminal moment in their
Yeah,
professional career.
a lot of the people that were there will say that. And in fact, anytime I cross paths with any of those people, that's what they go back to. We used to go to conferences occasionally, and people in Ontario would cross paths regularly. But the people that were at that event, they just found one another at any event you went to. They just had to be together. I wrote an article once for Canadian Education Association, and it was called Learning in something like hives and schools. And it was the idea about a metaphor for how animals get together and take care of one another. And they sometimes will travel in groups. And you look at starlings and the murmuration, the things that they do when all the starlings get together and they fly in the sky, it's mesmerizing and spectacular. But on an individual cases, if you just look at a starling, you go, that's a blackbird, whatever it is. But together, they do amazing things when they're at the right time of year if you catch them. And that's what we had. And I think the people that were there, they liked the point of getting together to the point where if they find one another, they're going to seek one another out again to do that, even in small groups.
Yeah, no, again, I think about, I can't think enough about, say enough about that experience. And I guess as I encourage other people to think about professional learning, it's part of it's knowing that not every professional learning experience it's not that everything has to look the same. It's just that how might you create something that's out of the ordinary, that's going to have something that's going to have a lasting impact with people, that's going to include these things. It's not easy to pull off, but I aspire to that in whatever way that can be.
And that's my own internal process of how to get
how would you
more of this
suggest
stuff.
these
But
teachers find one another nowadays, Dean? What's the method? Like we were,
yeah,
yeah,
that's the
because we
tough
were
part.
really
Yeah, the
lucky
whole
that
idea of
we had Twitter
networking,
in its infancy.
it's really tough.
You know, we started in
Very lucky.
2009. We had the first live synchronous chats online, and it basically broke Twitter. Like it had to
Yeah.
be, it was rebuilt from the time that we did that to handle all people using hashtags and networking and connecting. But I
Yeah.
don't know that's a safe place for people to connect anymore.
It isn't. It isn't. And I know it's fragmented. There's people that try all kinds of other social media sites and maybe there's traction, but there's no sort of really core kind of explosion. Well, a critical mass is, I think is what I was trying to say. But because my personal really only connection in a social media style place is
Yeah.
LinkedIn, and it's not really designed for that. Because one of the things that I always refer to, that like the playfulness of a place like Twitter in 2010 and 2009 was that people could talk about anything. You could talk about hockey, you could talk about teaching, you could talk about sandwiches, you could talk about anything. And through those sort of streams of consciousness, random things, you found someone, oh, you like the same music as I do. That's interesting. And now you have this little back and forth. And then all of a sudden you dig deeper. Oh, not only does people like the same music as I do, but this person kind of has the same job as I do. That's interesting. And now I'm open up to say, okay, I got a question for you about project-based learning because I hadn't thought about that before. That is just such a, and you think about even within school buildings and school districts where people try to create that atmosphere where there is time. That's why going to a staff room at break time is important. Like you go there, even if you don't say a word, you just sit there and you hear, oh, these people are talking about something that's interesting. And now I have some sense of who these people are outside of it. It's very difficult. And I would also sort of counter this with in the age of AI, where AI can do a lot of this stuff. A lot of I don't need to go to Twitter anymore to get a great lesson on project-based learning or whatever that might be. AI does a pretty good job of that. But what it doesn't do, right? Like what does AI know? AI doesn't make me feel valued. It doesn't make me feel part of a community. It doesn't allow me to move past sort of the technical side of the learning experience. And so there's a real, I think, going to continue to be an increased desire for people to have these kind of connections when they're more difficult to get. So your answer to your question is, how do people do it today? It's really hard. And I guess I think about, I don't know if there's a way to do this beyond your local community. So I think it's speaking to leaders, principals, whomever, superintendents, to create spaces where people can have some sense of belonging, even if it's just within your own district, which can be powerful.
Are
It's
ed
done well,
camps
but
still a
yeah,
thing?
it's difficult to do.
Yeah. What
No,
about
they don't
unconferences?
really happen anymore.
Like that to me, that
People, yeah, not really.
it was
That
to
was a
get
starting
like-minded
place,
people
sure.
to choose to get together about solving whatever issues they think they need to solve. That was a rich model. I wish
Yeah.
that had more traction.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time, and I think AI is pushing a lot of things. It's pushing us to to revisit the assessment conversations that we have been having, but haven't quite got there. It's pushing us to revisit the value of teacher relationships, which again, it's not a brand new conversation, but it's pushing us to redesign learning to account for the existence of AI. And right now, the tension does exist between AI robbing us from certain things, which it certainly can. It can outsource thinking if we're not careful. It
It's
can do a lot of
outsourcing a lot
damage
of
if we're not
jobs, and
careful.
like the whole industries are
Well, sure, yeah,
disappearing.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's a threat, but it also could be. What I'm hoping is it's also an opportunity for us to say, yeah, AI is great, it can do a lot of things, but boy, the human part of this is so much more important than we had before. And so, how do we find ways to do that one? So that anyway. I'm gonna just finish up here with a couple quick hitters for you as we close out our time. Again, I'm always fascinating, and I know you and I connected back in the fall. We had a nice game of golf together, and I got the sense from your conversation that you have made a smooth, or at least are in a transition space that does not necessarily have you thinking and considering about school and education like it was. However, Can you just share anything maybe that you're reading today that you think, again, it doesn't have to be anything education related, but just something that's,
Yeah, I
you're still
think the
learning. You're
AI
still a
and
learner. I know
robotics thing
that.
is spectacular. Like the things robots are doing. Like I used to do sessions with kids with Lego robotics back in the early 2000s, 2004, 2005, and have kids design these robots and they press go and the robot had to sense its environment and go do stuff. And that was mind blowing. Where we are today with what robots are doing, that's the next, like robots are going to be running factories. Like they're going to do manual labor. They see repetitions and can do it. So I've been all over a lot of stuff on robotics. I'm watching media on that on my feeds. I'm accessing information about that. AI is scary to me. A lot of what I'm reading about that scares me. I'm worried about the future and what jobs are going to exist. I think about school and what relevant things it could possibly be doing for young people to get them ready for a future that is like changing exponentially what's possible. Yeah, robotics, AI. And then unfortunately, I'm lost in the politics of the United States. Too much of my feed is cluttered by unsettling news over there. It is what it is. It's I do disappear down rabbit holes looking at I was talking about my golf grip. I'm excited about that. Putting strokes. I got that on my feed. Pickleball strategies, less about physical skill and more about strategy and player placement on the court. Athletics and sport was my thing growing up. In retirement, I'm spending a fair bit of time doing stuff and much less about trying to communicate with people. Two of my children are teachers. My daughter's a teacher. She's been teaching about 7 years now, teaching right now grade 2-3 class. So I like to connect with her about that. And my son graduates next year from Teachers College and will be looking for work in the same area, like primary, junior age, up to grade 5-6. So through them, I will be connected. But it's a different world that they're like a lot of the things they're dealing with are behaviors. That's a huge thing. If I was a teacher today, I'd really want to dive into how do I help kids that are struggling to be attentive or to be nice to one another. Yeah.
And again, some of this stuff is not a new conversation, but it's being elevated because of whether it's social media. We can blame all the things of why it is, but it is. And so we have to, the role of educators to be, I would not just humans first, but the idea of you're not going to teach math growing up, you're going to teach kids, which that's not a new concept, but it's one that has to be even more attended to in 2026.
If I wanted to put a lid on this, I would say if I was put my clever sheet hat back on, I would say to teachers, go try stuff. Try stuff that you know is the right thing to do. Don't always be downloading somebody else's lesson because it's so easy to do. There's a PowerPoint that goes with it and you, boom, are done. No, try what you know to be right. And I think great stuff comes out of that. And if you can do that and network with other teachers and share stories of what you're doing, that's only going to help you be affirmed and help them have further their own ideas and explorations.
All right, last question.
Well, I live in Komoka, which is just outside of London, Ontario. And we have a little place called Komoka Provincial Park that has wonderful walking paths through nature along the Thames River. So the Thames River, it forks and joins downtown London, and then the river heads west. And as it passes through the city, it passes through Komoka and through there's Komoka Provincial Park. There's a forest that's wonderful to go in and walk and breathe. In retirement, I've learned a lot about meditation, Dean. And getting out and breathing fresh air and just having nothing going in and nothing going out, trying to be that blank slate. And that's a remarkable experience I'd recommend to anybody who's looking for solace and quiet and reflection.
Excellent. Always good to catch up. Next time I'm in the area, you can take me to your lovely.
Yeah, I'm going to be better, Dean. Course. So sharpen your game.
No, you were already better than me. I've got lots to. You're surpassing me. I'll just live in the lore of my ping pong victory.
Yeah, we'll never play again. That one you can just
ago.
keep that title.
That's right.
Really good to talk to you, Dean. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Anyway,
look forward to crossing paths with you real soon.